It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Tyler Sweedock. Tyler Sweedock has built his career solving problems at the intersection of technology and urbanism. Tyler has held strategic roles advancing electric, connected, and automated mobility initiatives at the City and County of Denver, the Department of Transportation, and the American Lung Association in Colorado, where he led or contributed to some of the most innovative smart mobility projects and policies in the country. Tyler became the executive director of the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance in 2019, which is the first and only statewide coalition of public, private, academic, and research organizations committed to advancing smart cities initiatives across sectors and jurisdictions. Tyler leads the membership-based organization as it develops a new model for building smarter communities and regions. The Alliance manages a portfolio of projects that leverage innovation technologies like 5G to improve challenges facing the state through partnerships and real-world deployment. Welcome, Tyler.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
How are we?
Excellent.
Great. Can you all hear me okay? Awesome. Well, thank you, Cami, so much for the opportunity to present today. You were reading my bio. When I sent it to you, I thought it was short, and then when you reread it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is too much. So thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Tyler Sweedock. I lead an incredible organization here in the state that's working to advance smarter communities. We work with the city of Arvada very often, and with Bob Pfeiffer, who you'll hear from a little bit later. But today I want to dive into what's happening in this space. Broadly, what is a smart city? What does it mean to you, and where are they headed in the next 5 years? I don't know that we're at the Jetsons phase yet, but you might have an experience similar to what the Jetsons was here in the next 5 years. We'll talk through those opportunities and the challenges that face building smarter communities, because they are not as easy as they may seem. Am I advancing slides? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Beautiful. So what does smart actually mean? Advance, please. So the phone's in your pockets, right? That is really when the word smart started to become popular. But what did that mean? When the first iPhones came out in around 2004, what did smart mean? What is it, the functionality on your phone actually provide you that unites the smart thermometers in your houses, the smartphones in your pockets, the smart watches on your hands? What does smart mean to you? And I'm just gonna look out to the audience and see if I can get any responses. Bluetooth, yep.
Access to information.
Exactly, access to information.
Use of AI.
Use of artificial intelligence.
Knowing what I want to know before I know I want to know it.
Smart, right? Any other ideas? Ball and chain.
Data collection.
Data collection, yep.
Predictive analytics.
Predictive analytics. Great. Those are great thoughts, and none of them are necessarily perfectly right or perfectly wrong. There are a couple of very specific functionalities that make things smart, that allow you to be predictive and to make better decisions and to, improve your life, essentially. Those two features essentially are connectivity, so the ability for these things to talk to other things. And when you can do that, then you create a lot of data that can be used in order to improve processes, to connect other devices, and ultimately, hopefully, to improve your lives, which is where we get the word smart. So the first iPhone was connected to 3G, right? It allowed you to have apps and to connect to the internet. That's what made it smart. Where smart cities are going, and the word smart now, is the ability for devices to talk to each other. So, the sensor on your refrigerator can talk to the sensor in your home, and you can know whether, your food's gonna go spoiled or not. That's just a terrible example, but it shows you how devices can now talk to each other, and that is where smart cities are going, is if you have a network of connected devices in your city that are telling you, just like you can know your heart rate, or your pulse, or the temperature in your home, you can measure those things in your city and make more informed decisions on how to improve life. So I don't expect you to read everything on this graphic. That's not the point of it. the point of this graphic is to show you, it's a very illustrative of what the hypothetical, theoretical smart city might look like, where lots of different functions in the city become connected, and once you connect those functions, you can communicate with them and in real time make better informed decisions to improve traffic flow, to monitor air quality, to improve safety on the roadways. And so just a few examples here. Power meters inside of a building can proactively manage usage. So if you know and you connect the devices inside of your building when people are using energy, then you can predict when people will use energy and manage it more effectively. If you're a utility and you're a city and you own your utility, then you can use that information in order to prioritize and create efficiencies in how you generate energy and how you use it. A couple of other examples here. Traffic controls. So we're going to talk a lot about mobility today, but if you can in real time understand what traffic flow is across your city, then instead of having your traffic signals turn red and green on a set schedule, you can have them in real time adapt to traffic and change the red and green lights according to when they should be turned. So you don't end up stopping at a red light when there's nobody else around. So that's the idea of a smart city. And as you can see, a million different things can be connected and create data. And the problem with all of this is trying to determine what problems you want to solve, because connecting everything can be expensive. And this smart city doesn't exist today. But this is the theory, and this is where we're headed. Next slide. So what is a smart city? Really, the traditional definition has to do with exactly the things we just talked about. Using technology and what's called the Internet of Things, which is essentially the ability for everything to talk to each other, that connectivity, that universal connectivity, to make data-driven decisions that improve quality of life. And that might seem very vague to you, and it is, but ultimately that's what a smart city means, is how are you using connectivity and the data that comes from it to make smarter decisions that improve life in one way, shape, or form. So again, you're not supposed to read all of these things either, but this is a look at what's happening to cities today. And smart cities in a lot of ways has to do with how they're reacting to these changes. So on the left-hand side of this, what you can see are major technology trends. The Internet of Things, right, the ability for devices to talk to each other. Artificial intelligence and machine learning. Something called edge computing, where computation is done at the edge, right where it's occurring. Instead of going to the cloud and back, it creates latency and basically makes everything happen in real time. 5G, the next generation of connectivity, electrification of everything, and autonomy. These are all trends that are transforming entire multi-billion-dollar industries in less than a decade. And those industries have tremendous impacts on cities. Well, on government generally, not just cities, your counties, your metro districts, your state agencies. And ultimately, government has to be responsible for how these industries are changing, either as new users of this type of technology to solve a specific problem that we'll talk more about, or to provide access, right? Think about scooters. All of the companies, Uber and Lyft and Bird and Lime, that you've probably seen with scooters out there, for that business model to work, they need access to public right-of-way. And so there's a lot of business models that are literally built around the ability to access cities, the people in them, and the data that those cities create. And then there's also this huge section of how are these trends going to impact the growth, or how should they impact the growth of cities? And so planning and zoning, you have to understand how these are impacting and how you want to steer that impact over time. So smart cities in reality is really how cities are managing all of these trends, how they're using them as a city to improve life, and how they're reacting to them and steering change over time. Change. So, this is essentially a symbolic representation of where we are today. Cities are changing incredibly fast. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, hell, heck, even 5 years ago for some of you, would you have imagined that, you need to get somewhere and you're going to call up a stranger and they're going to show up in their car and they're going to take you to wherever you're going to go? Did you think that as adults in business suits, you would be riding on a scooter to and from destinations, right? Things are changing incredibly fast, and day to day you may not recognize them, but over the span of time, cities are drastically changing, and the cities of today will look very much different than they do 5 years, even 10 years from now. And that's what we're going to talk more about. So, ultimately, all of these trends provide new tools for cities, and smart cities are using them, right? But it's really, really complicated to figure out how exactly 5G is going to impact your city and how to make investments in fiber and how you're going to manage a new network of sensors. And so the way we define smart cities at the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance is it's a process by which you solve a problem. It is not, the amount of intelligence of your city is not determined by how many connected devices you have or how much data you have. It is how you use that to solve a specific problem, which is really, really important as we dive into the weeds of the Jetsons and what this is going to look like in the future. So, they're innovative problem solvers. They understand the risk of the status quo. We're not going to go into some of the major problems facing the state, because I think you're all relatively familiar with them, from traffic and traffic safety to air quality. There are a lot of major issues, and if we aren't going to take the braveness that it requires to look at these issues in new ways and look at how these new tools can approach them, then we're never going to solve those problems. Smart cities recognize the status quo generally is problematic. They're collaborative partners because those problems are really complex, and the city of Arvada is not going to solve traffic on its own. They have to work with the state and the county and the cities around them. These problems are regional and they're complex and they require collaboration. And finally, they are technology enthusiasts, and that is the right order that we like to define smart cities by. Not technology first, but technology at the end in order to solve a problem. Next slide, please. So, we are going to go into the problems. I forgot I have this slide. So, you're all probably relatively familiar with the major issues influencing the city here, but also the state overall. We have significant affordable housing challenges. We have rising traffic fatalities. In fact, 2020, even though people were driving significantly less, was the single highest jump in traffic fatalities in the history of the United States. We went from about 36,000 deaths on the road in 2019 to 42,000 in 2020. And we have significant air quality issues. I'm sorry, the formatting on this is not showing that very well, but roughly 1 in 12 children in Colorado have asthma due to poor air quality. And if you look at disadvantaged populations and minority populations, it goes down to 1 in 8. So these issues are only going to get more complex and worse when you look at population growth, because all of these are driven by growth. So these 6 issues that you see here, mobility, civic engagement, public safety, data, utilities, and housing, those are the issues that we, as an alliance of 26 cities, counties, and state agencies across the state, have identified as opportunities for technology to improve those issues. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk more about each of those issues that I just spoke of, but in order to focus on the Jetsons idea, but also to give you a sense of the actual work happening in this space, real projects, and real trends shaping cities, I'm going to focus just on mobility here for a second. There are really 4 major trends shaping mobility right now. First is electrification. So if you haven't noticed or heard or read in one way, shape, or form, electric vehicles are very much here. And every major automaker in the world has made a huge commitment to transition away from gasoline and diesel to electric transportation. And that's for a number of reasons, partly influenced by government policy, partly influenced by the fact that electric vehicles in a lot of ways are better than internal combustion engines. And that disruption has occurred in the history of the world pretty much overnight, right? Tesla formed in 2004. Okay, today, so less than 20 years ago, they are now 3 times as valuable. They are the most valuable automaker in the world, 3 times as much as General Motors, right? They make 1 car for every 100 cars that General Motors does. So the amount of change is incredible, and it's happening very, very quickly in the electrification space. Vehicles can now drive themselves for at least a portion of the driving task. Any new car, for the most part, that you go to buy has an option to have some level of automation involved. Adaptive cruise control that can control, your acceleration and your braking and your steering. And we're moving towards a world where the full dynamic driving task can be automated. Connectivity. So vehicles can now talk to themselves and to their surroundings. And that ability creates a lot of opportunity for governments to get involved and to help shape the way that transportation actually moves in your cities. And then finally, the whole sharing economy, right? You no longer have to own your transportation to get around. You can hire it as a service. And that mobility as a service model is disrupting everything from housing and with Airbnb to, transportation with Uber and Lyft. Next slide. So we're going to touch on each of those trends and real projects that are happening across the state as well as across the country. So in the electrification space, it's hard to overestimate how much is actually happening here. But when electrification started really in 2011, when the first electric vehicles really hit the market, the Nissan Leaf, there were 3 models on the market. Today, there are over 60 that you can go out and buy today, and it's going to the point where we're not even going to be able to count. Because, again, every major automaker is planning to electrify their whole lineup. And that goes from your light-duty passenger vehicles, your scooters, all the way up to Class 8 freight trucks. Everything is getting electrified right now. And freight and delivery actually provide one of the highest ROIs for electrification because the fuel is much cheaper, the maintenance is much cheaper. So you're going to see tractor trailers, you're going to see freight and delivery. Amazon, for example, has purchased 1,000 Rivian medium-duty electric vans. And as a community, you need to be thinking about and prepared for the infrastructure that's going to be required in order to charge the next generation of transportation. Faster charging. So for the most part, well, actually, every vehicle that you're going to buy has what's called level 2 charging, where you can plug it into a 240-volt outlet, and it can get 10 to 20 miles of range per hour of charging. That's how most people will charge at home. They'll wake up with a full tank, per se, a full battery, and they'll go about their day. But there's public charging called level 3 or DC fast charging that can put anywhere from 80 miles to 300 miles, depending on the voltage and amperage of the DC fast charger. And that's what's going to happen for the public charging space. It's what Tesla has on their supercharging network. That's 150 kilowatts, I believe. But we're moving towards megawatt charging. So think of an entire super Walmart store. That's how much power is going to go into one vehicle in about 30 minutes. So that's changing very, very quickly. Also, right now, the way that electric vehicles work is they take energy from the grid and they put it in the battery. The way that it's going to work in the future, and we actually have projects here in Colorado that are using this technology, is that battery in the car can actually be discharged to charge an entire building or to charge the entire grid. So if, for example, you have a grid outage, like we've seen in Texas, or occasionally we get here from storms, your car can charge your home, and the utility could use power from that car to charge the grid and keep it up and running. And then finally, if we want to talk about the Jetsons, drones and what's called electric vertical takeoff and landing are very much becoming a reality. Right now, drones are limited by line of sight by the FAA, so that's why you haven't seen a lot of them in commercial use, is because you have to physically be able to see them. But very soon, in the next 2 to 3 years, we think that the FAA is going to provide more commercial use of drones out of line of sight, which will enable the FedExes of the world, the Starbucks of the world, to deliver packages, small packages, using drones. The more, I guess, flashy version, though, is what's called electric vertical takeoff and landing, or urban air mobility. And these are flying taxis, essentially. So there are multiple companies out there, Archer and others, that have announced major contracts with like United Airlines for billions of dollars of aircraft that take off like a helicopter using all electric motors and then fly like an airplane. And they're small enough that they can carry passengers, 4 to 6 passengers, and then take you to your destination, just like, in theory, the Jetsons would do. This will be coming to cities. So these aircraft are promised to be coming out in 2023, 2024. They're going to start in Miami and LA, but they will be spreading to other cities. And what cities have to consider is, where are these things going to land? So there's these things called vertiports. Parking garages can be turned into them. This is a whole big topic that I'm going on a tangent on, but this is absolutely going to impact cities in the next 5 years. And you may have the opportunity, I would say 5 years from now, to fly in one of these urban air taxis. Next slide. Automation. So a lot of work happening in this space. Ultimately, automation is going from research and development to providing real services to people. So one of the real projects happening here in the state is that little robot that you see on the bottom right. That's being used to deliver food last mile to their cars, and up to almost a mile away from each other, they can share this information so that if cars are going to collide with each other, in real time they can notify the driver. And if it's an automated vehicle, then you can avoid that accident altogether. If the roadway operator is able to listen to those signals, which are completely anonymous, then you could also communicate back to a car where the road is icy. Or you can listen to the cars and understand when it's raining and where it's raining based on if there's windshield wipers going. Or if there's ABS deployed or an airbag that's deployed, what do you think happened? The car crashed. So there's a lot of information that we can collect from the roadway to increase the efficiency of transportation and to increase safety of drivers. Shared services. So we're moving towards a model where, and maybe some of you in this room aren't there, but I will say that the Generation Z and my generation, Generation Millennial, don't want to own a car, ever. They want to hire all of their services because it's more convenient, and sometimes it's cheaper. And so what you're going to see is this expansion of this mobility hub model where you're going to have the ability to take a scooter to pick up your Uber or Lyft, to grab an electric bicycle, or to charge your EV, or maybe a car sharing car. And the cities are supporting these with mobility hubs that will provide the infrastructure for all of these modes to take place in the theory of getting people out of single occupant vehicles and improving the efficiency of the system. Micromobility is going to continue expanding. So Denver just announced that their selected candidates for micromobility for bikes and for scooters is Lime and Lyft. And they are deploying, I believe, 600 different locations for micromobility across the city moving forward. This is only going to continue to expand. People are absolutely loving walking and biking and scootering after the pandemic, and that's going to continue to grow. And then there's these things called, on-demand transit and multimodal trip planning. So if you want a vehicle, you can call it, and it can arrive to you directly or close to you. Transit is going to start moving that way. It already is. RTD is moving in this direction. And you're going to be able to plan your trip and pay for your trip, even if they're not through the same providers, all in one pane of glass. So if you want to take, your car to the light rail station, get on the light rail, take a scooter to work, you'll be able to do all of that through one platform and make it seamless. Okay, so I think I stayed within my time limits. I hope that gave you a lot to think about, and that's just in the mobility space. Okay, so we're going to talk more about energy and water with Todd, and the utility space with Jared. These trends are shaping literally everything. And cities have to deal with it all and figure out how to use them as new tools to ideally improve life in cities. Thank you all so much. So I believe I'm calling up our panelists, Bob Pfeiffer, Jared, and Todd. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining me up here. And all four of us have blue jackets on, so that's interesting. Thank you all so much for joining me up here. I think we're going to have a great conversation. But first, I think you would do a better job introducing each of yourselves than I would. So I would love if you could just introduce yourself and your role in your company. Todd, we'll start with you.
Good. My name is Todd Hargrave, and I'm with Trimble, based here in Colorado. I work under the Utilities and Public Administration business unit for Trimble, and specifically under the water group. So I'm the regional business manager for the water group out in the Southwest United States. So I cover everything from Texas on over to Arizona, everything north, big region, and happy to be here with you, with everybody. Happy Friday.
Hello, I am Jared Massey. I'm the Executive Director of Neoteros and UCEC Smart here in Arvada. We essentially do IoT for smart city type deployments, as well as kind of retail and commercial intelligence and analytics. Yeah.
I feel like I should say, is this unmuted? Can you all hear me? Am I muted? I'm Bob Pfeiffer. I'm our Arvada City Council member. That's what probably most of you know. But today I'm going to be representing CDOT. I am the branch manager and superintendent of all the technology other than connected autonomous vehicles. We kept that out because it's just a whole other Jetsons thing. But other than that, my team runs, maintains, engineers, designs all the technology and the data analytics around how CDOT's becoming smart.
Thanks, guys. I get to work with Todd and Bob on a relatively regular basis. So, but Jared, good to meet you, and you guys do a lot of awesome work in this space. So, first question to the panel: how are each of you working to impact communities? Right, this is the Community Impact Forum in your day-to-day smart cities roles. And I guess what issues are you working to solve, and how can technology play a role?
I guess I'll kick us off and we'll go around the horn. So at CDOT, what we've been focusing on is really how to move people through the state more efficiently, as well as save lives. And we think we can do that through technology. It's a cheaper way to do it, believe it or not, than building wider roads or putting more guardrail up. And so what we're doing at CDOT in regards to impact, I'll give some use cases that are actually pretty cool. If you all remember, about 2 years ago, an unfortunate accident with a trucker with hot brakes came down I-70 and crashed about Denver West and killed a lot of people and a lot of Arvadans on top of that at that intersection. And we at CDOT have been trying to figure out, well, what could we have done to prevent it? So when you're thinking about technology, we're trying to think, well, what can we do? I mean, no matter what we do in this area, widening the road or changing or doing another truck round is not going to solve it, the physical aspect. So what we've been doing is we've been working with Google. Actually has been really good with us. They're in Boulder, and their main office up there has been real supportive around it. But what we're doing is we're taking weather stations. We have what we call variable speed limits. They change the speed limit. You'll see those once in a while on the side of the road. We're taking sensors that detect the speed and the volume of traffic coming down. And we're right on the cusp of making sure we have the right technology to look at vehicle brakes. So when they go by, we can see if they're hot or they've exceeded through FLIR or some other technology. We're still debating on what we want to use. But each one of those devices, when you talk about they need to be connected, they all need to be connected to each other. They go up into our Google Cloud, and what we're doing is we're determining if the speed limit should be lowered. So if we see too much volume, or we see the weather's changing, or we are detecting more hot breaks, the speed limit will move from 65 to 45, and that's all automated. There's no human involved, there's a lot of decision making happening, and the hope is we can get some attention that if traffic starts slowing down, we'll slow down those truckers as well. The next evolution of that is we are going to try to detect which vehicle has the hot brakes, and specifically around freight, and then actually tell that vehicle through in-cab as well as on our big message boards that vehicle, we are requiring that they take the truck ramp. You know, usually it's barrels and deep sand, but we want to pull that person over and get them in there. They're always afraid to go in there because they think that they'll get in some big trouble. Believe it or not, they don't. We prefer them ruin that than go and kill a whole bunch of people down the road. So that's an example where we're taking technology, trying to create smart technology to do that. One last use case I'll share that we're excited. We're not quite there yet, but it's in our roadmap. We take care of 2,700 avalanches a year, CDOT does, out of the 3,200 avalanches that take place in the state. Most of those are under CDOT's jurisdiction. What we want to do is start detecting through a system called LiDAR movement of snow or mud, and be able to detect if it's going to hit the highway, and we have 40 seconds to notify the public. So what we want to do is start lowering the speed limits and putting a message up on the message board that an avalanche has been detected, please lower your speed limits or stop. Not that we've lost anyone in there, but the potential is there, and we want to make sure we save lives, not put anyone in danger. So we're trying to work on that right now, and that ties into edge computing and some other things that we're looking at, but those are kind of things that CDOT's working towards, more automation and more information shared with the traveling public. So that was a lot. Is that what you expected?
That was exactly what I was hoping for.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Yeah, so at Neoteros, we're doing we're looking at footfall traffic versus actual car traffic and demographic information. So we use various 3D sensors to be able to detect zone performance, is what we call it. So how do people walk through areas? Are there obstructions in areas that prevent proper flow of people? Let's say you're in a commercial building and you're getting in an elevator and you're in a 40-story building. If the elevator is full, so if there's a certain percentage fill rate based on the cameras, it will no longer stop at additional floors to pick up additional people. So it's all about getting people to be able to flow through certain areas in a more efficient manner. And on top of that, we're doing audience analytics. So we're taking artificial intelligence at the edge to detect what type of demographic is in a certain area. So you can plan your city events and things around the actual demographic in your city, in your area. So yeah, that's kind of what we do.
That's great. I know a lot of cities were using that type of technology to try and inform how much revenue they expected to gain from retail business, right? How much footfall traffic they were getting to and from certain areas. And if they implemented a policy like, let's close the road, like Arvada did and had great success with, how much impact does that have in real time versus revenue?
Thank you. So, as Cami knows, Trimble has been around for almost 50 years, and mainly in the GPS space. So anytime you see people out there surveying, holding up those poles with the disc on top, those are Trimble devices. But we've also sold those into the agricultural space to make farming more efficient, paving more efficient for CDOT or folks like that. I specifically am on the water side. And on the water side, we have connected IoT devices that are autonomous in terms of being battery powered and have cellular modems inside. So they collect data, they'll record data for water pressure, water level, air temperature, rainfall, things like that, and then deliver it up to the cloud. It's all about connectivity on the water side to help cities become more smart, where they're really were lacking data before. And we run the gamut in terms of everything that we do. So that's really what our business model is, selling into the utility, providing those into the utility.
It's It's great, yeah. And working with Trimble, I learned that when you connect a water system, you learn a lot about it that you never knew. Like most jurisdictions don't know that they might be leaking water underground. There's no way to detect that until you connect them and understand what that flow is. So yeah, the work that you guys are doing is great. So, I talk about smart cities a lot, and it's hard sometimes for people to understand how it might tangibly impact them. And so I'm curious on your perspectives on what ways you think people in our communities here in Colorado will be impacted like directly by smarter cities. How will they see or maybe experience that? And you're welcome to choose a use case that you work on directly or just something else that you think of in the space.
Well, I'll go since I'm still holding the
Yeah.
microphone. So again, with water, I mean, if you've been in Colorado for as long as a lot of us have, you know the reality of water here in Colorado. In the world, fresh water is less than 3% of all the water that we have, and most of that is locked up in glaciers. So fresh water is a big deal. When a utility or a city takes fresh water and they try to distribute it to customers, as Tyler mentioned, leaking water can be not only a customer service nightmare for the end customer and the utility, but it can be an environmental impact as well. So again, putting smart sensors on there to measure pressure. We also have smart sensors that can listen for leaks. So leaks within a pipe also, or almost always make a hissing sound. So listening for that acoustically, and then delivering that data again via the cloud is one way that we as a company deliver that smart technology to not only utilities but to end customers as well.
Yeah, like previously talked about with efficiencies, the way I see a constituent or somebody in a city being impacted by this is very minimal. So there's certain days when you have everything flows well. You get in an elevator, you push the button, it immediately opens, you get up to your place, no stopping, you're not in a traffic jam. That's very few and far between anymore, but that could be like the new normal. So when on those days where you're like, wow, today was great, everything went well for me, every day should be like that, and our technology will help with that. But from like a business perspective, if you're an owner and you're using zone performance with 3D cameras, you pull up heat maps and you'd be able to tell, which rooms were occupied today, where were people moving, and you would only have to have your cleaning crew clean the rooms that were highly used or used at all versus just cleaning the same stuff all the time no matter what, even if it's already cleaned and hasn't been used. And so that's just a couple of use cases.
Speaking of water, it's interesting you bring that up. I believe the city is replacing our water meters so that residents can detect and see how they're using water. So what's interesting with that is the more information you put in the constituency, they can make good decisions, or the decision they feel is best for them and their household. So that's a good example, and you'll start seeing that here in Arvada around the meters and being able to control that, or at least see what's going on in your house every day, because we kind of all guess. I don't know how many of you actually go and open up the meter and look at it, but we usually just wait for that bill to hit, and then you're like, oh crap, shouldn't have watered the grass that much. But now you can do through your phone, and you'll start seeing that. So that's a good application. But we also need to start working on how long does it take to get one end to the city to the other, or how long will it take for, or is there a traffic accident that's real time that I know that doesn't always come through Waze or any other platform, but it really impacts your travel time. We want to get people efficiently through the city. The other thing that we're not there yet, but one day I hope we get there, when you talk about cameras and detection, it's pretty interesting you say that, because cameras can do a lot. And it's not just recording and facial recognition, all the things you see on TV and these spy movies. But sometimes what we look at is we just need the camera to have some visual movement, so it's actually changing the image to the matrix, right, to ones and zeros, and saying, okay, I see a movement. I should take the lights that were dimmed along the street and maybe move them up to 70%. Or maybe I'm counting pedestrians. I can now listen for a car accident and notify the police and raise the lights to 100%. These are real things that are happening in other cities, and we'll get there. I will say, I just want to put a plug in, I'm sure we'll get there, but to do that, you have to have communications. You have to have these devices connected. All these things are nice to have if we don't invest in the infrastructure to make it happen. And that means fiber and maybe some wireless connectivity and some other things. Because if we don't have that communication, it's just a dummy device sitting on a pole that no one's doing anything with. And so that's going to be critical to be successful around that.
Yeah, device-to-device connectivity is critical. One thing I remember very vividly at CDOT when I was there is we're working on connected vehicle technology, and if CDOT could know exactly when a crash happens, right now they have closed-circuit televisions, cameras essentially on the roadway, and they have an operations center with people monitoring these cameras. But there's a lot of cameras and there's only so many people. And so if that camera was talking to the connected vehicle system, the camera could auto pan, tilt, and zoom to where that accident is and get eyes on the road right away, which then could communicate to police and let them know what the situation is on the road. So there's just so much opportunity there. Okay, I think the opportunities that smart cities present are relatively clear at this point. Safer streets, cleaner air, faster commutes, greater resilience, but there are a lot of barriers to realizing some of those benefits. And so can you speak, in your work to some of the barriers that you think are facing building smarter cities that you've ran into?
So I help a lot of communities around some of the subjects when I travel for CDOT. What I find the most common problem around the subject is folks not knowing what they're trying to solve for. It's exciting to go chase that squirrel or that blingy object, but what are you truly solving for? And so what we find is wasteful spending that is unsuccessful in achieving an outcome. It's really easy to get inside technology and overspend, underutilize, and not achieve any good progress. So a couple things from a government perspective or local perspective is being able to identify what are you trying to do, what is your desired outcome. I'll give you an example. I'll use the camera I just used, and let's just say we put a camera in Old Town that's counting pedestrians on a corner because that has an economic impact to the businesses there. So if the outcome is to do pedestrian count so that we can inform our businesses of how successful intersections are with walking traffic, that's great, that's an outcome. Now you go in and you find the technology and you find a way to get that data and share that data, but then what else can you do with it? What else are you trying to attempt there? Well, I want a safer Old Town. Okay, well maybe we should be listening for traffic accidents or gunshots, which we don't have that here, just we're a safe community. But that's an example that could happen. Or dimming the lights, like we talk about protecting the night sky. Maybe the light should dim down to 30%, and then when it sees movement, it moves to 70%. If there's an accident, it goes to 100%. You can grow, but you got to look at what are you first trying to achieve, what is your roadmap, what is your strategy, and then see what you can add on to there at the end. I think people just get spun and don't know where to start, and so sometimes what happens is they go nowhere. The other thing that government has a hard time with, because no one wants wasteful spending, and not that the best way to avoid wasteful spending is that if you do bring something in that's technology savvy, if it doesn't work in a very short window, you need to fail it and fail it fast. It's okay that you invested or you partnered real quick in there, but don't force it to work, because that's going to cost you 10 times more when you're forcing technology to work when you knew it wasn't working at the beginning of what you wanted. And that is something that government I see does all the time, is just like, well, we're going to get it to work because we already bet on that horse and we want to make it work, and it just becomes a money pit. So that's something that government needs to change their mindset on.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there. So with some of our technology, specifically 3D cameras and people counters, if you deploy that, not only does it help you find X, what problem you're trying to solve, but then the AI built into it will show you how to solve the problem as well. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone there. The technology, you make the investment, it helps you find the issues, and then you can correct those issues as well. But another one of the problems we see is, businesses just don't want to be they don't want to take the first leap. They don't want to be that pioneer. They want somebody else to dip their feet in the water, test the success, and then, if it goes well for them, okay, I'll jump in now. So I think we need to get back to a place where leaders are willing to take calculated risks and be that pioneer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you that adapting technology has always been one of the biggest issues. Trying to fit the square peg in the round hole type of thing. But over the last 15 months or so, I think things have become even more stark in terms of the problems, and that is funding for cities, municipalities. It's just, this pandemic has really put a wrench into a lot of things. So there's some other things coming down the pike in terms of funding from the federal side to help municipalities that really can help them adapt technology, and I think we'll see that coming up. So one of the things that we're doing at Trimble is typically we would provide an asset to a utility, and the utility would own that asset. So we've developed a program where Trimble still owns the asset, and the city essentially leases it from us as a company. And so that helps offset the capital purchase. So if you think about, for instance, if a city wants to measure water pressure across their distribution network, maybe that would cost them a couple $100,000 in a capital purchase. So if we can actually translate that to, break that down to less than that amount and on an operational budget basis, that's a helpful thing. And then the other thing is we talked about, or I just talked about the federal side of providing funds. We're developing programs for type of template programs for addressing those type of situations that we find out here in Colorado, whether it might be water leakage or even on the wastewater side, sewer overflows, things like that. So it's just all about adapting to the changing market and what's happening right now. But I mean, I agree with both of you guys. Is if you're trying to fit the wrong type of program into something that they're not needing, you're going to be chasing your tail.
All right, this will be my last question, and I'd love to see if anyone in the audience might have any questions for the panelists. So be speaking or thinking about that. So in order to implement these smart cities technologies, it's kind of inherently interdisciplinary, right? Like you can no longer just be a traffic engineer if you want to implement connected vehicle solutions. You need to have the IT team involved. You need to have the safety team involved. Like there are a lot of folks that it takes for this to work, even just in one agency, let alone across multiple types of organizations that are working together. And so smart cities is very collaborative. There's public and private partnership. And so can you speak to the importance of that collaboration and partnership when trying to innovate with cities?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is very important. So again, I mean, I've got a big area that I cover for Trimble. I'm one person, there's 24 hours in a day and 7 days in the week. I wouldn't be able to do anything without partnerships. So typically what we do with our company is we rely on manufacturers' representatives, firms that are local to the region, to actually deal with the actual utilities, who can integrate with them, interface with them on a day-to-day basis, develop those relationships. That's one way. But the problem with collecting data is that you're introducing another data set to a utility or a city. And if you talk to IT groups out there, nobody wants more data in a different data set. So it's all about trying to integrate, or, as you mentioned earlier, Tyler, is to have that connectivity with data. So a lot of people who know the utility business know the data set GIS. So if you think about having water pressure data or sewer level data coming in, delivering that data right into the native GIS system is hugely important, so that the GIS group can then create dashboards to show the health of the network. That's one of the ways that we operate in terms of partnerships. And then on the back end, interfacing with organizations like local chambers of commerce, the Smart Cities Alliance really helps us try to be a better steward for technology out there in dealing with utilities in cities as well.
So with Neoteros, we realized that as a small business, you can't be all things to all people. So the heavier you have connection with partnerships and strategic alliances, the better everyone's going to be. In any business anymore, you know, if you do too much and you bite off too much, you're going to be kind of okay or pretty good at everything, but not great at anything. So, you know, partnering, it allows us to really kind of stick to our mission and be really, really good at what we're trying to do, and then let every other partner be really good at what they're trying to do, and then collaboratively we, you know, bring a product to market. We collaborate with cities and whatnot, and just get stuff done a lot quicker, more efficiently, with less red tape, and yeah.
So I'm going to answer probably at two levels. One about communication and collaboration. Convergence of industry, that's what we are experiencing. You know, back in the day, you like where I'm at, you have transportation, you have an IT industry, you have a telecommunication industry. They've all converged into CDOT now. You know, that's something that was never forecasted when you look at a 100-year-old civil engineering organization. You know, my wife always makes fun of me because it seems like ones and zeros is all I see. And when you're around a bunch of civil engineers, I think they think I'm a robot or something. But the best thing to do is just communicate, and how does it impact them, and how does it impact the different groups? And they all have to work together. But when we talk about like public-private partnerships, which I do lead in the technology side for CDOT, what we found is the most successful is coming up with an idea and not an expectation. And why I say it that way is sometimes businesses, and I know it's hard on some of the businesses, to come up and say, I have a great idea, but can you give me all this money? Because you're government. We can't do that because we can't be we have to be taxpayer, you know, stewards of taxpayer money that says, well, let's prove out your idea. And to give you a good real example, you think Google would be that way. Google has come to us and not charged us a dime just to learn transportation and just to learn how do they advance their street view maps for asset management. Amazing, they have the data, but they don't know how to use the data, and we're teaching them. They're going to help us with improving our asset management, but not at anyone's dime. And once they prove it, then let's talk about spending money and getting that done. So when I talk about partnerships, think about that as coming to an idea, coming with a conclusion or a possible conclusion, and see how you can work together to maybe productize an idea or a product. The last thing I would like to add, and I just want to put this plug out there around technology. You know, there's technologists that we can go all day long and deploy technology and do it and kind of, you know, think it's sexy and so forth. Us weirdos or techie guys like that. But at the end of the day, you have to have a product owner. You got to have a data owner. You got to have somebody who's like owns the output of what you're doing. So an example in CDOT, like it was a mental shift because my team always felt that they had to own every technology on the road. I said we own the technology and does it function, but we don't own how it works and when it needs to be used. And an example of that is we have the most robust weather system in the state. NOAA uses it. All these other organizations use our weather system. We spend a lot of money on it. My team puts it up and installs it in random places. That weather system, I don't know if it's working or not. Our meteorologist at CDOT says, wait, that makes sense. It's not 32 degrees when it's 105 in Denver, right? To me, I'm saying, well, data's coming in, I'm good. But you really need to have an owner to it that says, yes, that works, no, that doesn't work. So make sure when you identify technology, make sure you have a product owner so they can help drive the results and know that it's successful. So, stop.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, I think you and Jared both hit on kind of the same point of the type of partnership that we like to facilitate at the Alliance is where the public sector knows the problem, right? Like, better than the company. And if the company wants to develop the right product, then they have an interest in engaging with the city to learn. And that's where there is a lot of fertile ground for partnership.
And your organization's like perfect for that, to cultivate that kind of relationship. And I appreciate that you're there. And I know you're at the table a lot because sometimes I think local government don't know where to start. So they need a trusted partner to bring all the partners together.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'd love to hear from the audience. We've got, 3 minutes. So a question or two, if anyone has any.
I have a ton, but I'm not gonna, or, you know, these questions, but one of the things that you had mentioned was the mention of knowledge for constituents to understand this technology. But there has to be some sort of behavioral change with the community to adapt and be willing to take on this technology. Have you noticed successful tactics in maybe changing the perception of the use of technology and automation in some of these programs and systems?
Well, I could take a quick stab at that. I think I know where you're kind of going with it. I think there's always a fear of what it is and what it isn't and what it can do. I think the problem I see a lot is I don't know if people don't know what they don't know. And if you give an opportunity of a realm of possibility of what technology could do to impact your life, hopefully positively, I think once they see that and they can touch it and see it, I think they'll change. But until then, right now, it is all a bunch of ones and zeros, and it just seems like we call it, just, FN, freaking magic. We just don't know. It just happens. But I think the more information, and I believe in free data, so basically open data, I believe that we put out all our data sources, and we do this today at CDOT. We put all the data sources out there so that companies like these two up here can innovate off of the data we collect. The data doesn't narrow down anybody. We don't know anything about anyone. All we know is there's so many cars, there's so much volume, there's so much, the traffic lights are out of sync, those kind of things. But there are industry partners that can take that data and innovate to improve life, and I think getting them to sell their product and adapt to that, I think that's how people kind of get better and better. I mean, think of the smartphone. I was just thinking about, even standard definition TV. That wasn't that long ago. It really wasn't. It was what, 10 years ago? And now, when you see it, you're like, man, I feel like I went back to the 1950s. And you're like, no, this was 10 years ago. You don't know how to improve and adopt technology until you see it. So that would be my answer. I don't know if you guys want to answer.
So one of the things with smart cities that I hear a lot is privacy. So everyone thinks it's going to be very big brother, cameras everywhere. Cameras, facial recognition is a thing, but we just have to educate people and say that, hey, our stuff is GDPR compliant, we have privacy laws that we're abiding by, and like you said, here's the data sets, here's the video, here's like what it's actually capturing, and it's not capturing your physical face. So we just have to be better at educating people and showing them exactly what kind of data we're pulling and showing them that we are not Big Brother.
Thank God.
Well, so yes, I mean, when you're talking about trying to gather people to all agree on something, when you're talking about an environmental impact, it's really easy. So we typically find that going in to try to solve a problem like water leakage or water loss, with technology, there's not much of a headwind with that.
I think we're at time, Cammie. So thank you to all the panelists so much.
So before you guys leave the stage, we pay really well here at the Arvada Chamber of Commerce in cookies. So our partnership with La Patisserie Francaise, you all get a bag of cookies as a thank you. One more big round of applause for Tyler and the rest of the panel. I think this is fascinating. I know they share in my passion for this. If you have questions, I'm hoping you guys can hang for a minute or two, so feel free to grab them. And we will share the video of this, so if you have others you think might be interested, feel free to share that with them after. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month.